Good evening. If we could ask you all to silence your cell phones for us, we are recording. And we also want to take a minute just to let you know that back by in our gift shop are the restrooms, should you need them. So I would like to take a moment and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's guest speaker series. Tonight's presenter is Mason Winfield. Mr. Winfield is the founder of the Haunted History Ghost Walks in East Aurora, and he is also a widely renowned author, paranormal investigator, researcher, and historian. Tonight he will be presenting on some of his favorite paranormal stories from the Genesee County's history in the paranormal history of Genesee County's Mason Winfield's Top 13. The Holland Land Office Museum guest speaker series is made possible by a DEC grant a grant re-granted by Go Art, and it's through New York State. So welcome, Mr. Winfield.
Thank you, Mason is fine.
You know, I could probably talk about, I've got a short honorable mention list on this talk, but until we have our visuals, I've worked for days on this. I'm working on a book, and I get real serious about a presentation for people. It just instantly becomes a priority. It doesn't matter whether I make a nickel or not. I'm a teacher. So I should probably talk just a little bit while we're waiting for our visuals. I am not a ghost hunter. I don't run around the dark, try to take pictures of ghosts. I'm not a psychic medium. I don't talk to the dead. Well, I can talk to them all I want. I don't hear them talking back. I'm a profiler. I look for patterns. If somebody tells me a ghost story about their house, they say they saw a ghost, there's only two things I know for certain. One, somebody told me a story. Two, where the story happened. Story, sight. That's what I do. I reach my conclusions based on patterns, stories, and sight. There are very interesting patterns in the way eyewitnesses tell their ghost stories. They're very interesting. I've got some little clues, because people, I don't think they make stuff up very often, but I can usually tell if someone is, because I've got my cues. There are also general patterns in the kinds of places that pick up a lot of stories. And that is pretty much my study too. I look for patterns in places and stories. And right now, okay, good. For my next miracle. I'm the founder of a ghost walk company, Haunted History Ghost Walks in East Aurora. It's a small business, and some years we do a lot better than others. COVID didn't help anything. But now I'm more interested in being an author, because what do you want written on your tombstone? Man, that was a good ghost walk, you know. I don't want that written. I'm an author. This is my most recent book. Actually, the artist who designed the cover is in the room, Matt. That young denim stud back there is Matt. Matt is helping with a lot of my stuff. And this is quite recent. It's for sale tonight. The book I'm expecting to be popular is this one called Iroquois Supernatural. It was written by myself and Michael Bastine, my Algonquin friend, and it concerns the supernatural traditions of the Six Nations. And I am never going to know as much about the supernatural tradition of the Six Nations as anyone who's brought up on a reservation. There's people here right now who know tons more than I do. But are they writers? You know, are they teachers? And so that's part of my gift, I think, is to be able to get out there and speak. And I'm embarrassed I've designed this presentation. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question besides why am I so incompetent? Other than that, yes, sir.
Real quick, your ghost walks are only offered in East Aurora, or are they throughout other locations in Erie County?
We do them we do them a bunch of places this year, and we flip them, we flip-flop them. I mean, we're going to do one in Canandaigua this year. I lead them personally in East Aurora. I think we're going to revive Allentown, which is a historic district in Buffalo. And we do the haunted pub crawl. In Rochester, you know, ghost walks are, I know I could do a good ghost walk there, but a ghost walk usually depends on a good script, a good tour guide, and good marketing. I'll give you the good script. If I'm doing it, I'll be a good tour guide. But you need all three of those components, and they're real hard to run far away from home, even an hour away. I mean, you've got to go there and walk around and meet people and put up posters, and that's just too much energy for me right now when I'm trying to write books. Yes?
Do you ever have events where you have psychic mediums come in?
Yes, we do. Do you know one?
I do.
Ha 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 ha. Love to have you. The reason I handed out that piece of paper is because if you want to be on the newsletter of my website, which goes out about once a week, put your email address on the back of that white piece of paper and then give it back to me. That white piece of paper is otherwise useless. Yeah, we made up, they're extra question and answers from.
It's going to be a few minutes.
Ah, okay.
Just a little.
Well, okay.
So you might as well just.
Let me tell you a few of the unknown mysteries about Joseph Ellicott. Now, Joseph Ellicott, he's not in my talk, but this is the Holland Land Office. The way Western New York was basically opened up for the white guys to move in. The Treaty of Canandaigua, 1794. A bunch of white guys got the Seneca, made a deal with them. Famous Seneca were there in Canandaigua, Red Jacket, Corn Planter, Black Snake, you know, heavy hitters. I think Handsome Lake. There were a lot of them there. And at the end of that, these 6 rich Dutchmen from Holland bought it all up. And then they split Western New York up into lots. So people who wanted to expand here would pay them for the legal treaty to a deed, and then they just make their farm. And Joseph Ellicott was an explorer, he was an outdoorsman, and he was their land agent here. And during this time, were you aware that there were a lot of land wars in Western New York? They weren't military style, but it was like lock and load, get off my property. It would go like this. You bought your land, bought your deed, but how do you know it's not a fake deed? So a lot of people bought land thinking they had a real deed, and they'd develop it. They'd take 8 acres of trees, clear the trees, build a house, put a farm in, get everything working, and then some guy would show up 20 years later and go, oh, sorry, you're on my land, because they had been sold, they had been swindled. So not only was there a lot of shooting going on over that, but a lot of people tried to put their family burial plots on their land. Because if you did end up with a court trial, and you could tell the judge, well, not only have I made this land something valuable, but my family's buried here, and that would help you win your case. But Joseph Ellicott, there's a debate as to whether or not he was a Freemason. The Masonic historians think he was, some people think he wasn't. But Joseph Ellicott was into some kind of occultism because his older brother, Andrew Ellicott, was one of the designers of that mystical Masonic streetscape of Washington, D.C. Joseph Ellicott of Batavia, his brother, Andrew Ellicott, helped design Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, they give credit of Washington, D.C. to a Frenchman, Major Charles L'Enfant. But L'Enfant was a prima donna. Washington fired his ass. And the guys he got to finish it off were the Ellicott brothers, Andrew, Joseph, and Shemp. I forgot the other one. And truth be told, Joseph Ellicott went a little nutty towards the end of his life. I think he started cross-dressing. Yeah, that doesn't play on the frontier. And I think, nowadays there'd be a lot of exaltation they'd offer, I don't know. But in those days, they didn't quite know what to make of that. And then he was institutionalized and ended up taking his own life on Halloween night. So, while I'm waiting for my presentation, does anyone have another question? Yes?
Oh, what's your favorite haunted place you've ever been to or heard about in Western New York?
Oh, in Western New York. My favorite haunted site in Western New York, I have two. One's the Roycroft in East Aurora, and the other one is the Ontario County Courthouse in Canandaigua. That is a magnificent building. The Ontario County Courthouse in Batavia was designed by two different families of occult architects. Let's see. Canandaigua, forgive me. I'm talking about Canandaigua right now. I think the first architect was Henry Searle. And the Searles were a father and son team of early Genesee Valley architects. Massive Greek influence. Golden rectangle, sacred shape, dome tower, octagon. Their buildings all get ghost stories. And then when it came time to remodel the thing, they brought in Andrew Jackson Warner. And the Warners, Andrew Jackson and Jay Foster, were a pair of occult architects too. They were just about 50 years apart. And the fact that this building was the site of so many famous court trials is dramatic. And even though that courthouse only may date from like 1849, the first courthouse in Canandaigua was on the same spot. They just took it down, put something else up, took that down, put something else up. And so I would say that Ontario County Courthouse is one of my favorite haunted sites. It's got that statue of Lady Justice holding the scales. And Susan B. Anthony, the abolitionist, well, she was that too, but she was the suffragette. Susan B. Anthony, she voted in a presidential election. They arrested her, brought her to court in Canandaigua, put her on trial, and she said, well, hell yeah, I'm guilty, I did vote. And they convicted her, and it said that the scales of Lady Justice fell, well, they say that, fell off there, and it's up there about 50 feet. Oh, I've got another one for you. This is a Red Jacket story. Red Jacket. First of all, Red Jacket was regarded as a genius. I mean, he was universally admired. There were famous people from all over Europe coming to Western New York to meet Red Jacket. He was a remarkable character. His wit was unparalleled. There's actually a story that isn't in my talk from the Batavia courthouse. And the story goes like this. There was a young Seneca man who was sentenced to something like life imprisonment for stealing a crust of bread to feed his starving child, just something like that. It was just horrible. And Red Jacket tried to defend the guy and didn't work. And Red Jacket, incidentally, could speak beautiful English, but he pretended just to be a dumb Indian, because it helped him manipulate people. But anyway, they say that Red Jacket came out of the courthouse at the end of this unjust trial, and he's walking out with some friends, and he sees this plaque here with a picture of Lady Justice. And he points at it and go, "Who on plaque?" And they go, "Well, that's Justice." And then Red Jacket goes, "Where him live now?" I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared to extemporize. I'll give this well, I've got a few more of those. There's another Red Jacket story, which isn't quite so flattering. As much as they admired the great Seneca orator, Red Jacket, he was known to be a dipsomaniac. Yeah, he liked a little, little extra sauce with his meals, you know. And there was a story goes that the French Duc de Liancourt is here in Western New York, and he's traveling on the old trail through Rochester, and they cross the Genesee River at the flats, and they're riding along. About 5 miles later, the Duke says, and you know, I really want to meet the great orator Red Jacket. And they go, well, you already have. Didn't you notice those 5 guys passed out along the canal? One of them, you know, that was one of them. And, you know, incidentally, famous people tend to have more ghosts than ordinary people. I'm not saying they really do, but it's like if there's a haunted house and there's any evidence that, like I call this the George Washington effect. You got a haunted house. If there's any evidence that George Washington ever passed through there, bam, that's who the ghost is. So folklore, I kid you not, that'll be what folklore does. They will get a ghost story about a building, pick the most famous stiff that ever had anything to do with it, and that's who the ghost is. So Red Jacket has a handful of pretty famous ghost sightings. One of them's in Canandaigua at the Ontario County Courthouse. One of them is in Batavia at the Batavia Courthouse. One of them is in Orchard Park along the Four Corners. There's an old pub, well, it's been taken down now, but it was the Orchard Downs. It was there since 1811. Red Jacket passed away in 1835, so he could have passed through. And let me think, there's a couple more of him. There's one up in Lewiston, Route 5, the Old Ridge Road. Would anyone else like to ask a question?
Red Jacket, Buffalo Creek Reservation.
Yes.
He lived there too.
Oh, well, sure, yeah. He was buried. Did you hear of a story from the turf of the old Buffalo Creek Reservation about Red Jacket?
Which one?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, okay, all right. I meant that supportively. I wasn't trying to be confrontational. I will tell you that Red Jacket, there is a ghost story from the Cattaraugus Reservation about Red Jacket. It was written around the turn of the century, around 1900. There's a 15-year-old kid out there who will eventually become Everett Burmaster, the famous antiquarian and historian. And when he's a kid, he lives near the Cattaraugus Reservation. And he and one of his buddies, at one night, they're walking along the lakeshore area, which is real spooky at night. It's beautiful, too. And they're walking out, and they hear this rustling sound. And they look over, and by a ruined house, they see this form come. And it looks like a fairly real person. It's not like it's white or anything. And he's got kind of a beaver skin hat. I'm reminded of Curly from the old Three Stooges on the frontier. But anyway, he's not dressed like the famous paintings of Red Jacket. And it walks by and they watch it walk away. And then the kids are scared and they run to the party. And they're telling their elders, oh man, we just saw this ghost and all that. And there's an old Seneca there and he's just laughing. And he goes, you just saw old Red Jacket, don't worry about it. That house where you saw it, that was his daughter's house. And when his daughter had a divorce, they pulled the house apart. That was the way they did it. And Red Jacket's bones were in a cherry wood box because he was buried at the Buffalo Street Cemetery in Buffalo, South Buffalo actually. And he was, when they relocated the graves, and that was a white Christian cemetery, and Red Jacket never wanted to be buried in a white Christian. But his last wife was a Christian, and she disappointed the old orator, had him buried at Buffalo Street. And when the graves were relocated, his family from the Cattaraugus came up, and they probably brought their guns, and just made sure that Red Jacket's bones came to them. And they were kept in his daughter's house on the Cattaraugus for a number of years. And that was where the ghost was sighted. And of course, there's a big monument to Red Jacket in Delaware Park. No, it's actually Forest Lawn Cemetery in Buffalo. And the stereotype is that Red Jacket is really under there. Right. The Seneca I know do not believe that Red Jacket's bones are truly there. I interviewed someone from the Cattaraugus who said, we just gave them dog bones. Not good, huh?
Not good, it's still, I have to.
Okay, well, you know what I ought to do? I'll take my laptop and I will dictate this talk. I'll tell you my top 13, and I will come back here someday and make it right. But for now, let's haul it up.
Just that your computer's not connecting with the...
Mine's a Mac. That's a HP. This is one of the new Macs that takes a specific connector. We've tried emailing it as a Keynote, as a PDF, as a whatever. Well, I won't go through the shortcomings of my plan. And I think I might have had the right devices for a connection in my car, which is not with me. It's with the Subaru people. I'm driving a loaner. So, without further ado, I will do a rather incomplete talk on the paranormal mysteries of Genesee County. First of all, I need to tell you, I'm going to start, when I talk about the paranormal, I'm going to start with an old kid joke. Remember being kids and the jokes kids would tell? And they're so dopey, but they're actually funny because the kids don't know anything about anything, and. So the story goes, there's the traveling salesman, and he's passing by the farm, and it's dark, and he needs a place to stay. So he goes to the farmer and says, you got to put me up for the night. Farmer goes, well, yep, we'll do that, but the only place we got for you to sleep's in the barn, but that's where my daughter also sleeps. So he pulls the daughter over and he goes, look, this is the traveling salesman, and we've got to establish a secret midnight code if he tries anything funky. So if the traveling salesman, because you're the farmer's daughter and you don't know anything, so if the traveling salesman gives you a little bit of that, yell out apples. If he does a little bit of that, yell out oranges. And if it's a little of that, yell out peaches. And of course, it's midnight, and what does the girl yell out but fruit salad? The paranormal is fruit salad. A lot of people think the word paranormal means ghosts. It does not. It includes ghosts. Paranormal means something that is simply outside the accepted range of the normal. And there are a lot of subjects that are not ghostly that are paranormal. For instance, mystery monsters, cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. And there are some wonderful stories about lake snakes in upstate New York. Would really surprise you. But my first paranormal mystery of Genesee County is one I call the Twitching Chicks of LeRoy. In late summer 2011, a girl in LeRoy starts developing, I won't interpret them. If I step on the wrong electric cord, I probably will. But so the girl develops this mysterious affliction of a speech impediment, a funny laugh, gestures. Before long, 12 other girls have picked it up. Before long, a 13-year-old boy and a 36-year-old woman have also started doing the same thing. It was mind-boggling. For one thing, they suspected something environmental. There was a 1970 train derailment the Lehigh Valley line, spilled all kinds of chemicals, and it wasn't at the school, but it would have gotten into the water table.
It plumes actually towards Caledonia.
Oh, why don't they get the ticks? And why doesn't Caledonia get the ticks? I don't know.
Because it wasn't.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so there was other toxicity in LeRoy. There was a Jell-O factory that allegedly, from the turn of the century, and apparently in the production of the dyes and all that, there was a lot of toxicity. There was a, all right, what else have I got on here? Oh, there are gas wells on the property of the school. And LeRoy was the world capital of rat poison. They had a product called Rough on Rats. Yeah, what could go wrong there? You know, we got a lot of this around. And so what do you need but a good activist? Aaron Brockovich came to town. I think Lois Gibbs did. These girls were on the Today Show. They were on with Dr. Drew. And it was eventually concluded that, I had some wonderful slides. You remember that old commercial, an anti-drug commercial from like 1987? We got this tough-looking guy in a kitchen. I mean, he looks like he just wants to go. He comes out and he looks at the camera and he goes, okay, you want to hear this again? All right, I'll slap you up if you don't, but here goes. Red hot skillet here. 2 eggs. This is your brain. That's your brain on drugs. You know, it's like there was something affecting these children. By the end of the year, most of it was over. It was diagnosed as, well, yeah, it was scary. Anything psychological en masse, you start to think, But it turns out that one of the girls had a legitimate case of what they call Tourette's syndrome, which is tics and funny vocalizations. And they decided that all the other people picked it up sympathetically. They call, maybe not, but that's what the psychologist said.
They had a second doctor's, because they kept sending everybody to the same doctor, because I live in LeRoy. And they had a second doctor opinion who thought a lot of it was hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a few girls had Candace, which is a streptococcus
Oh, wow.
thing that makes a toxin in your system.
Oh.
Which can cause temperature.
Well, you're discrediting my theory that there's anything paranormal about it. No, that's all right. No problem. No problem. You want to get up and give the talk? No, it's okay. No, I'm being wise. Please, this isn't, no, don't be sorry. I'm being wise. This is an open-ended talk. Anybody say anything. So I'm just going to point one thing out. About 1.5 miles north of the school, along a bend in I think it's the Watka Creek. Is that the way they say it? There's an ancient earthwork, ancient monument. It's in a book written by E.G. Squire, and I think it's called Aboriginal Monuments of New York State. But it's interesting. And it's a square, a perfect square. So it's probably not a fort. It was probably some kind of religious monument. But whenever you've got these impossibly ancient, sacred constructions, the living think they see things. And I have no idea what connection any of those girls had with that site. If I was going to write this site up for a book, I'd dig into it. I'd find out where the names of all the sufferers, where they all lived at the time, and if they had any connection to that site, because who knows. Now, the second of my paranormal mysteries is one I call the seventh son. In 1921, the Batavia papers were afire with stories that a young medicine man had come to town, and he was ready to heal the sick, cure the lame, drive demons out of your house. The guy, he was an 11-year-old Mohawk from the Akwesasne Reservation. His name was Abram George. And he moved with his whole family to 104 Liberty Street in Batavia. Absolutely. And he immediately set up shop. And the young fellow was a massage healer. He just had people lay down, he did his work with touch. And the family never charged anything. They just said, give us what you can. They were rich quickly. The kid was good. He was, if you have any belief that this exists, which I do, I think some types of alternative healing, very effective. The kid was dynamite. But the medical profession in Batavia didn't like him too well. And the school just didn't like him because he wasn't in school. So the forces of whitedom, the suits, started to come down on it. And so young Abram just said, all right, I'll tell you what, move to Rochester. They moved to Rochester. He was so popular up there, there were mobs in the streets. They had to call the police to block the road off. The kid was good. And there were a couple problems, though, besides what the suits were doing. One of them was the kid was getting exhausted from all the work he was doing. And you know, anyone who has any type of a gift, you can burn it out. And sometimes you can burn it out so bad that they're done. Or maybe they're just done for decades and then they get it back. So young Abram, part of their complaint against him was that he was underage. So 2 years later he comes back and they say that he's 16 now. How he aged that fast in 2.5 years, who knows? But at any rate, Abram's return didn't go so well. But this kid was famous all over. He was this close to making it real big. And when the papers asked the dad, where do you think he gets his healing powers? The dad, he said, well, he's a seventh son. The seventh son. And the papers got in on this. You know, the Batavia papers did a lot of write-ups on it. And a couple of the reporters are going, oh, we never heard about this seventh son tradition. And they sent people to the Tonawanda and asked them. They go, hey, you know anything about the seventh son stuff? And at least they either didn't know or they weren't putting out for the reporter. That's been known to happen. So as far as the world knew, the seventh son tradition of having special powers is typically African Americans. Now, some of the African American music was getting popular, and there was a known song about a seventh son that might have been overheard in that age. But at any rate, young Abram went back to Akwesasne, back to the reservation, did not have a long life. And there was a Batavia reporter named Scott Desmet, who in, I think, 2002, did a wonderful research on this. I think he worked for the Batavia Daily News. And he dug into the story up at the Akwesasne, and he actually located people who, I mean, the kid probably died 1950. And this reporter found some people who remembered him. And he found one old girl who said, oh yeah, I knew him. He was a real nice guy, very shy, very quiet. My sister dated him for a while, but he got into drinking and he didn't have a long life. But we knew he'd have healing powers. After all, he was a seventh son. So I'm going to talk a little bit about John Gardner right now. Now, John Gardner was a Batavia-born author, 1933 to 1982, not quite 50. And he was born on a farm in Batavia. Parents were educated, very religious. And this guy was a knockout scholar. He was the author of a number of prominent books. One of them was Grendel. It's a retelling of the Beowulf myth from the perspective of the monster. He also wrote the Sunlight Dialogues, which is set in Batavia, very magico-realistic. And Gardner had enormous energy. He was a very prominent literary critic. He was said to be very eccentric, though. The pictures you see of him, he looks pretty good, but they're all black and whites, and they say he was so blonde that he was virtually albino. And when he was outdoors, he had to wear sunglasses all the time, which made him look a little kooky. And they say he drank a lot, too. And for a guy whose literary output was like that, this guy was dynamite. He won a number of major book awards. And when he was about 35, he wanted to teach at SUNY Buffalo, UB. And UB had a big lit department. It had some very good writers there and some stuffed shirts. And, you know, not everybody who's acclaimed great is really all that great. So you get some people in your own day that, and then maybe 50 years. But John Gardner, he called it like it is. And he wrote a book called On Moral Fiction, where he talked about literary trends of his day. And it really pissed somebody off at UB, and there was a campaign there to keep him from ever teaching there. And regrettably, I don't know. And this guy was as good as anyone they had, as prominent. That just shows if you tick off the wrong people. And I think the reason he wanted to work at UB is because it was the most prestigious university within motorcycle range of Batavia. I think he just wanted to take his motorcycle to work every day. And it was very unfair what happened to him. But at any rate, he loved Batavia, lived here, walked everywhere. And he came to his end on a motorcycle in the fall of 1982, and near Susquehanna. But he was a magical realist, a fabulist, and he's Batavia's connection to the greater world of literature. He's as good as any Buffalo-born author I've ever heard of. Now, Mark Twain is a big name, but he wasn't born in Buffalo. F. Scott Fitzgerald, also magnificent, not born in Buffalo. This guy, John Gardner, good one. In June 1905, this is my fourth paranormal mystery. In June 1905, there was an outbreak of sightings of something mysterious in the on Oak Street, which is 98, seemingly half a mile north of us. There's a gulch. And the gulch is not too far, I guess, from where Lion Street comes into it. Really, I can't identify the site, but it was somewhere around in there. And people reported that in this gulch, which wouldn't have been as developed as it is now, they saw some crazy apparition that looked real, but then it disappeared. And some people thought they saw a big, shadowy horse. Some people thought they saw a woman in voluminous robes with no head. Some people thought they saw a cat, presumably a big one. But they saw all kinds of forms. But the trick is somebody'd go, they'd whip a rock at it, and it would change its form. And then they would run like hell, or it would. Well, there were enough witnesses, and they wrote about it enough in the paper, that you start to think, I don't know. Something could have been going on there. And this shape-shifting bogey, many world societies have stories about tricksters and shapeshifters and stuff, but they very seldom enter the paranormal, meaning eyewitnesses in a contemporary period say that they see them. I mean, folklore is the collected stories of the past. The paranormal is apprehensions about the present in general. But this figure of a supernatural being
They called it the specter.
they did, and the Oak Street specter. Okay, well, that's a serviceable word, but I'm calling it a puka, because that is a figure of Celtic folklore, Scottish, Irish, that does pretty much the same thing. And the word has many forms. It's related to our word for bug, puka. It's also the name of Shakespeare's inimitable trickster in Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck. He just made a generic into a first name. And incidentally, that white piece of paper you all have, if you want me to put you on the newsletter of my website, which will go out about once a week, I will keep you appraised on my events, if I can read your printing. Yeah. I kid you not. I do this all the time. 50% of the e-addresses I can't read. So it wouldn't hurt to put your phone number on there too if you think your writing isn't perfect. And I'll tear it up and throw it away. I won't telemarket you.
It had to be something because my great-grandfather had a business like where the Trader Downs is. He had a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
It got so bad that they would close early and get home before it got dark
Oh, wow.
because they were so afraid of this.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But before I get going, I need to tell you that these apparitions are very often associated with graveyards. And I looked at the spot where people see it, and I went to all this trouble to do the graphics on my... So, there used to be a cemetery at Main and Lyons. It was probably bigger than that. It was the West Main, Old West Main Cemetery. And it's so near the Tonawanda Creek that it kept getting flooded, and coffins with grandma would go, soaring down Main Street whenever there's a flood. So people decided to relocate the bodies. So it's not a cemetery anymore, but right where Lyon Street meets Oak, I think that's about where the Beastie was seen. And I should tell you something else. Shakespeare in Delaware Park in Buffalo this year is doing Midsummer Night's Dream. Yep. And I teach a little bit of literature, and I've got some devoted students, and they all love Shakespeare, So we're going to do a caravan with picnic baskets, folding chairs. We're going to do a caravan to see Midsummer Night's Dream. And anyone who wants to do that with us is more than welcome. Either drive yourself in, or maybe we'll get a limo or something. That's going to cost, but whatever. But if you want to hear about events like that, get on my mailing list. So I think that's all I've got on that one. Okay, Devil's Rock in Stafford. We're doing well on time. Now, Devil's Rock, Stafford is east of us a ways. Devil's Rock is this rock that makes a sort of a T. It's got a table on it. And it's kind of big. It would be very heavy. And the legend of Devil's Rock is that Old Scratch was looking around for some trouble to do in Stafford. Maybe he heard about that farmer's daughter. And a bunch of angels jump the devil and get a chain, they leash the chain around his neck, and they fasten him to Devil's Rock. And then they're waiting for the Archangel Michael to come down and slap him up a little bit, give him a little waterboarding, But allegedly, the way the rock was made, Old Scratch, in his desperation, keeps running circles around it with the chain until the chain breaks, and that's how the rock was made. Okay, so far so good. What's that doing? What's an old folktale doing here? Well, these place names in New York State are highly suggestive. Anything with the name spook, snake, or devil is devil. Oh, well, we'll get to that. There's a Spook Hill near Middlesex. There's a Snake Hill in Saratoga Springs. Devil's Hole Cave near Lewiston. Devil's Lane in Malta near Saratoga Springs. Spook Woods Road in Conquest, New York, not far from Oneida. There are, by my count, at least 17 devil places in Western New York. I talked about the Devil's Hole. There is the Devil's Rock in Livingston County, just near Webster's Crossing. The Devil's Bathtub is a very curious pond in Mendon Ponds Park. The Devil's Punch Bowl is a high, unusual pond it's a pool actually, in Mount Hope Cemetery. The Devil's Nose is treacherous rocks in Hamlin Beach State Park. The Devil's Cove is on the other side of the bay in Irondequoit. The Devil's Pool is a little natural bathtub in a sort of a creek it's in Cattaraugus County. The Devil's Elbow is a hazardous trail that runs through the southern tier. Well,
Devil's Lake is in Indian Falls.
oh really? Do you mind me while I'm going to write? No, that's all right. Can't do that, no. So the long and the short of it is, wherever you've got a spot that's named spook, snake, or devil, it probably means there's something curious and mystical about it. And people tend to see things there. And when you really research these things and you dig into it, you very often find that it was a place of not necessarily evil to the Native American societies. It was a place of energy. And the white guys get here, and don't forget that most of them were pretty fundamental Christians. And so when they run into some kind of mojo that doesn't fit their system, they just snap, spook, snake, or devil. So anytime you hear those place names, look out. Yes?
There's also a Murder Creek up in Akron, New York.
Thank you. Got that. It didn't make my list, but thank you. Oh no, there's loads of those. Actually, the murder places are very often associated with disasters or rumors of disasters, maybe ghosts too. But if you've got a valley or a hill called spook, snake, or devil, it'll be a paranormal zone. Now, I'm going to talk about something many people don't think about when they think about the paranormal or about ghost stories: trails. And I have this beautiful map of New York State. I will come back there one of these days and I'll straighten this out. But get an old map of the ancient trails in New York State, and you're going to see that there are a handful of very important ones. One of them is Route 5. Right out here. It goes right across the state. Route 5 is so old, it was probably pre-human. It could have been made as a migration path during the ice ages by the animals. Yeah, could be really old. And then the Native Americans start coming here and they use it. And then the white guys get here and they widen it, a lot of it, make it a cart track. And it got the nickname, they used to call it the Great Mohawk Trail, but it got the nickname of the Iron Trail because there was so much military hardware clanking along it during 200 years of colonial era wars. And the trick with these trails is, there's nothing like Route 5. I mean, has anyone ever heard of something called the Burned Over District? We're in it. The Burned Over District, loads of cults, communities, alternative religions got started here. Famous, prominent. That's not the point of this talk. I can't think of one of them, maybe Roycroft, that's more than 10 miles from Route 5. It's like you make a map of Route 5 like that, make a map of battles, ancient sacred sites, haunts, religious cults, all the power, metaphysical power that runs along Route 5. But there's another one kind of significant. It is one they call the Old Niagara Road. Starts at Fort Niagara. It's older than that, but it starts there. And it kind of diagonals till it gets to Batavia, and then it hooks up with Route 5. But the Old Niagara Road. And it is paved over today. I mean, many of these ancient trails underlie our most important roads. Almost any numbered road in New York State used to be an ancient trail. 98, 63, 77. And there was an almost superstitious dread of the Niagara Road because, Fort Niagara, 1730s, prisoners going in, raiding parties coming out, and they all used this trail to get into the interior of the state. These old trails were vision places, sacred places, war paths, and they're ghost places. I bet you, I've not made a heavy study of ghost stories in Batavia, but I bet you if we took a county map and I tracked ghost stories, there'd be pins on the map making a very clear pattern of Route 5. For some reason, the trails pick up ghost stories. So, here's one of my favorite. This is from I don't think it's from the res, but it's near it. Spirit Pond. Spirit Pond is in Alabama. It's right off of the, I guess the 63 and the 77 overlap for a while. It's near, there's a farmer's market near there. I think it's Kearns Farmer's Market. Yep. It's right in back of that. You can see it from the road sometimes. And this little lake, it's 7 square acres of water surface, so small. Divers. They call it Divers Pond or Divers Lake too. We know some of the folklore about it because Reverend Samuel Kirkland, 1741 to 1808, he was born in Connecticut, forget the town, Stores maybe, but anyway, he studied religion at Yale and he wanted to work with the Native Americans. So he became a minister to the Oneida and the Tuscarora. And the only 2 of the 6 nations who fought against the British and stayed loyal to the colonists were the Oneida and the Tuscarora. And it was thought that it was due to the influence of Samuel Kirkland. He was just so revered. But he wrote about Divers Pond. There was a legend of a serpent, giant monster in Divers Pond. It's tiny. And you had to do these tobacco ceremonies to keep the serpent from coming out and working havoc. And Reverend Kirkland, you know, he wasn't too keen on belief in sea serpents, but he left Divers Pond without sinking foot or toe in. But you know, the tradition of lake snakes, very common in New York State. Almost every navigable body of water has got some kind of story of a serpent. There is the Seneca Lake serpent. This is a paranormal story. In 1901, there was a paddle wheel steamer with hundreds of witnesses who saw some kind of a monster out there. They even rammed it. It's in the papers. They have no nickname for that beastie. Silver Lake has a reputed serpent. And I know somebody made a fake, but that doesn't mean there was no legend there. And the nickname of this serpent is Sylvie. Lake Erie has a giant serpent. The nickname is Back Bay or South Back Bay Bessie, South Bay Bessie, or Bayside Bessie. They're all pretty good names. Lake Ontario has a serpent. This is probably the great horned serpent of the Seneca myths in opposition with the Thunderer, but they nickname it Kingsty. Cayuga Lake has a kind of a big tadpole. They call it Old Greenie. Canandaigua Lake has one that the newspapers used to call his snake ship. There was actually some kind of a serpent reported in the Erie Canal, and the Kinzua Dam, they saw one. I met witnesses. Eldridge Lake near Elmira has one they call Jasper. Onondaga Lake has a big serpent they call Mosquito, at least in the folklore. They even saw one in the Niagara River. And Canandaigua Hill, not the lake, but the hill, has a serpent. And the name of the serpent is something like Wasistawana. Yeah, and his brother, I don't. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's go on. I will tell you one more thing about Divers. Yeah, I know, you gotta listen. I will tell you one more thing about Divers Lake. It's an old flint quarry. And remember the old Niagara Road? It's right along it. And flint was very important to the pre-industrial Northeast. And most of their wars were over control of the flint trade because they didn't have the tools to do mining. So you can only get the flint where it's close to the surface. And a lot of the ancient forts around here were due to somebody simply wanting to establish control of the flint trade. And these impossibly ancient places tend to be folklore batteries associated with monsters and little people and ghosts. And Divers Lake has a very strong reputation. So, hold on to your hats. This is topic 8, the murdered Mason, the William Morgan situation. This is so well known in Batavia that I don't think I need to develop too many of the details, but let's just put it like this. The Freemasons, my dad was a Freemason 32nd degree, my grandfather was a 33rd. These guys were good, hardworking guys. They're not out to take over the world. But the trouble with any hierarchy is that nobody knows what's going on above them. So level 33 knows everything about 32 or anything below it, but it knows nothing above. But there really aren't many levels above 33. But at any rate, William Morgan was a war veteran of the War of 1812, or he said he was. And by 1826, he is living in Batavia. And let's see, he's 44, his wife's 26, no, 22. He's not getting enough rest. And he's discovering that trying to support a young family is getting in the way of his drinking. Yes, his friends refer to him as a quarrelsome drunk. I'd love to know what his enemies called him. So he gets the idea, how do I make money without working? Well, got an idea. I'll write a book exposing the secrets of the Freemasons. Bad idea. Gets jumped by the local Masons. And they tried to warn him and buy him off. They bring him into the Batavia Courthouse, and they accuse him of stealing a shirt. The judge won't buy it. Get out of here. They snag him, take him down to Canandaigua, accuse him of running up a bar tab. Yeah, that makes sense. Throw him in jail in Canandaigua. His wife, somebody gives his wife the money to bail him out. He's in Canandaigua. A coach goes by, and he gets out of jail, and he's standing on the streets of Canandaigua at midnight going, well, here I am, what am I doing here? Carriage goes by. Bunch of guys jump out, grab him. The people in the village hear somebody yelling, help, murder, help. The carriage takes off to the east. And 15 minutes later, everybody's standing around going, what the heck going on? And then a different carriage with more horses goes riding right by, and they hear someone inside going, help, murder, help. The thing scoots up towards Rochester, ends up at Fort Niagara. The guy is probably killed. So the murder of William Morgan will probably never be solved. The best likelihood is that the Freemasons didn't kill him because they were afraid he was going to reveal their secrets. It's because a lot of the local insiders were having some land deals that were a little shaky. And it probably had something to do with financial hanky-panky. But I will tell you this. Joseph Smith, the prophet, the founder of Mormon, Latter-day Saints, was fascinated by everything to do with Masonry. And William Morgan's widow became one of Joseph Smith's wives. Yeah, Lucinda. Yep. So, okay, topic 9, the Byron Earth Wheels. Oh yeah, obscure story, but goes like this. I'm going to talk a little bit about crop circles. You're probably aware of them, and a lot of them are faked because there's these two British guys named Doug and Dave. And if you've ever seen them talk, I'm sure they're both alive right now, but they're delightful guys. And they go, well, we go out at midnight, and we got this plank here. I'll show you how we do it. Got some ropes, and they'll show you how they make their crop circles. Okay, that's great. Crop circles have been around a lot longer than Doug and Dave. There are old newspaper reports, and I mean in the days from the 1500s, where they're reporting crop circles in the English countryside. They're not as complicated as the faked ones, and there are differences between a fake crop circle and an authentic one. For one thing, the fake crop circle, the grass blades or whatever the wheat is are broken. In a non-faked one, it's like they're curved. Oh yeah, there is something going on with crop circles. If you test the soil in a faked crop circle, Doug and Dave, there's nothing different about the soil. If you test one in a non-faked one, it's sterile. There's no bugs in the soil. It takes 24 hours for them to start coming back. There truly is something going on. And there was a British outfit called the Dragon Project. And I knew members of the Dragon Project. Very interesting stuff. And Matt is helping me found a research organization around here called the Spirit Way Project. He's our official artist. But at any rate, we would be devoted to researching supernatural paranormal folklore and tradition in Western New York. But the British outfit, the Dragon Project, their goal was to scientifically study ancient monuments, Stonehenge, ley lines, Avebury, famous cathedrals, test them with electronic gadgets, test them with sleep experiments, dream experiments. I mean, any way you could test these things, they were doing it. Very interesting. And an old buddy of mine was Sig Lonegren. He's still with us, but he's not doing all that well. But Sig is a prominent author and dowser. And Sig said that he had dowsed crop circles. And he says if you can get to them before they're trampled on by 800 people, you can really find something out about them. And he said that crop circles scare the hell out of him. He said they just are inexplicable. It's almost like they're messages from the earth, from like the world mind, telling humanity, might want to adjust a few things. All right, topic 10. It's a book called The Diary of Alonzo Typer. Now, how many of you have heard of the American horror writer H.P. Lovecraft? Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft, okay. Well, Lovecraft, 1890 to 1937, was a guy who had his life, he wasn't broke, but his dad went crazy, his grandfather went crazy, and he grew up around craze. You know, he did a real good craze. And he started writing short stories for Weird Tales magazine. And he created this mythos, a pseudo-mythology about the elder gods, these monstrous forms who once ruled the earth. But there was another term, they had some opponents, I think they called them the old ones or something like that. They knocked these evil beings into another dimension. But then, because the good guys really weren't the good guys, they were just the neutral guys. So the good guys don't really care about humanity. The bad guys want back in. And Lovecraft wrote this mythology about this waves of communication through psychic means, through magic, ancient cults, ancient languages, and just crazy. But it began to be picked up by other writers, and they were all buddies, the horror writers. You'd be shocked how close buddies they are. And I go to horror conferences once in a while, and I'm not a horror writer, but occasionally I write something a little creepy, so they invite me. I get along with everybody okay. But the Lovecraft circle includes a couple of other writers, including Robert Bloch, the guy that wrote Psycho, Robert E. Howard, the guy that wrote the Conan cycle, Conan the Barbarian, Clark Ashton Smith, a wacky poet. A fellow critic of the day said, you know, nobody since Poe has liked a well-rotted corpse as well as Clark Ashton Smith. His poetry is really macabre. August Derleth, a couple good short stories, founded Arkham House Publishing. But the long and the short of it is that the cycle of these gods that Lovecraft created are omnipresent. Big. I mean, most of these guys never realized the success, financial, that their work would after their death. If they had lived another 20, 40 years, any of them, they'd have been billionaires, or they'd have done really well. But one of the myths of this god, the chief god of the evil ones, is called Cthulhu. And Lovecraft gave them all names. My favorite name for these evil gods, he's trying to make things that are in a non-human language. A god named Tsathoggua. I mean, I stubbed my toe the other night. I'm sure I yelled out, Tsathoggua! But there's all these motif of these monsters. There's a t-shirt, Cthulhu Tequila, with a worm. This time the worm eats you with a worm coming out. And, there is a T-shirt with something like Kool-Aid. You know, Kool-Aid, the pitcher. Boy, I enjoyed that one. They've got this one shot of a monster, and it says, "Respect your elders," representing the elder god. They've got a picture of sort of like Richard Nixon with an octopus on his head saying, "Cthulhu for president. Why pick the lesser evil?" But to get to the subject of our tale, there's this mysterious guy named William Lumley. As far as we can tell, 1880 to 1960. He's a Buffalo guy, a night watchman in Buffalo. And he starts corresponding with Lovecraft. He's a pen pal. And he's telling him, you know, your stories are really right on. They're real true. Lovecraft goes, what? And Lumley goes, oh, yeah. Yeah, I go out at night in Western New York, and I see the evidence of ancient rites, the pre-human cities, you know, the caves filled with artifacts. And he's telling Lovecraft, I see this around Western New York. I know your stories are true. And Lovecraft, you know, I mean, Lovecraft is no average dude, you know. I mean, he's a little, and what Lovecraft would write about this pen pal, Lumley, with his buddies, and he'd say, man, there's a real wacko in Buffalo that's writing me all these letters. And if Lovecraft thinks you're wacky, you've got to be one bent boyo. But at any rate, Lumley wrote one story. And the story is called The Diary of Alonzo Typer. And the story is about a guy, and he sets it in Batavia and Attica. It's about a guy who comes to Western New York to inherit a piece of property. And he meets the land agent at the Hotel Richmond in Batavia. That's where they have their meeting. And then he goes to this farm in Attica. And he starts going through attics and basements, and he's led on a long journey. And at the end of it, he goes, cannot stop. The demons are coming. What am I going to do? You know, it's just like right out of Monty Python, you know. And then they go, writing here becomes indistinct. But Lovecraft edited it for him, and then they published it. But the fact that he said it in Batavia, and he's out and out telling Lovecraft, oh yeah, I know there's creepy stuff because I see it around here. Topic 11, the Alabama swamps. Oh yeah. The Alabama swamps are a paranormal zone. They pick up folklore and reported paranormal experience of virtually every type. Ghost stories, Bigfoot, shapeshifters, crazy lights, UFO abductions. I talked to someone who said that she had been abducted at the Alabama swamp. How many have seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail? You know the story where the guy goes, she turned me into a newt, and the Inquisitor goes, she turned you into a newt. He goes, well, I got better. You know, it's like I almost said, you got abducted? She could have said, well, I got better. But the Alabama swamps are a major paranormal zone for folklore. And my favorite tale probably comes from a cop. And he came to one of my ghost walks in East Aurora, and at the end of the walk, you know, we're all hanging out at the Globe, and he said, you know, I saw something once that has always creeped me out. And he was on Route 77, where it overlaps. Yeah, he was going through the Alabama swamps, or near them. And he said, I saw this blue light. It was about that big. And it shot out of the woods sideways. And then it hit the road. Then it went straight up. And then it went the other way and out of sight. He goes, you ever hear anything like that? I thought I was crazy. And I go, well, no, you just saw a witch light. That's all. That's a good place for them. Topic 12. This is one of my favorites. The Allhart site. It's in the town of Sweden, New York. So sometime around 1930, there was a farmer named Charles Allhart who's got a farm there. And I guess while he's poking around on his farm, he discovers a bunch of skulls that have been buried, decapitated heads. Has anyone heard about this, the Allhart site? Right. They don't want you to hear about it. There's a real protectiveness in archaeology these days. There's things they don't want the public to know. This is one of them. I found out about it through back channels. There'll be very little more I think I will ever find out about it. But they found 13, I think it was 13, it might have been more, somewhere between 10 and 20 decapitated heads. Yeah. And the anthropologists interpreted it as a sign that, well, probably there was a village there that was talking a little smack to the Six Nations. And, that's history has shown us, and they just sent them a message. Just took off a few heads and probably mounted them on stakes and buried them. But so I was real curious to find out where this might have been. So I was driving up there one day on my way to Rochester for something, and I take the 390 or whatever it is and pull off the road and start asking people questions. They go, you know where that site is? They go, no, I don't know. Most of them said they don't know. I go, you ever heard any ghost stories around here? They go, well, yeah, there's this clump of trees over there, and we always see crazy lights. I figure, all right, pull into the driveway, right? I go, hey, they were home, they talked to me. I go, you guys ever hear any crazy stuff around here? They go, no, not really. Did you ever hear something called the Allhart site? They go, well, yeah, that's right back there. That's where they get the lights. So finally, our last topic is called train tracks and witch lights. I have wonderful maps of the old railroads throughout New York State. But the long and short of it is that the New York Central had a bunch of lines. And apparently there's one that went from Attica to Batavia. And I think it had the nickname possibly the Peanut Line. Yeah, okay. These things are not that easy to dig up, But in the fall and winter of, I believe it's 1877, people started seeing crazy lights on these railroad tracks. And there's a wonderful article in the Batavia News. A reporter, forgot the guy's name, but he has a wonderful series of interviews with people who have described seeing these crazy lights. And don't tell me, these fireflies. No, they aren't. You can tell the difference between a witch light and a firefly. And they're all different sizes, and there's a lot of them. And the guy would occasionally, they're all over him and his horse and buggy, and he'd try and flick one with his whip, and it would, and very miraculous. Many eyewitness sightings. So I think we should probably come to the end, but we're not that far. I've got a couple minutes for you. So I can tell you that on my honorable mention of paranormal sites, the 1806 West Main Cemetery, so often flooded and torn up, they had a rather famous ghost there, at least 200 years ago. It was called the Woman in Black. Now, there was a UFO flap on August 2nd, 1952. The Batavia airport, including 3 professional pilots, reported up to 4 metallic objects frisking about in the sky. People all over the area were making calls in for about an hour. Batavia has actually had quite a legacy of spiritualism. Some very prominent spiritualist mediums, as well as people that were just holding a long series of seances. Like every Wednesday, they would have a seance in their house. Very interesting. And one such site was the home of Sarah Stevens, who was a 218 East Main, then at the corner of Liberty Street. It's probably not there now. She is a schoolmistress. She was devoted to psychic communications, probably had seances for 40 years. And again, I apologize for the lapse of my visuals. The talk would have been quite different, but I'll come back here. We'll straighten it out. So thank you all. Thanks for joining us. Cheers to all. Cheers to all. Cheers to all. So I've got a couple of books that I could dispense for sale. If you like the research in tonight's talk, probably that one, Iroquois Supernatural, $20 flat. I can't make change, but I could take a check. This is my new one. This one is a book about a wizard, a contemporary wizard. No, not like Harry Potter. No, really, the narrator's always wising off on Harry Potter. He goes, it's not like that. This is the real thing. And it's called The Prince of the Air, which is an old nickname for the devil. And lastly, my first book, Shadows of the Western Door, has a bit of the researcher on here. This Shadows keeps on trucking. It's gone through like 10 printings. It's 25 years old. The only copies I've got left are a handful with a shrink-wrapped CD. So if you buy this, you got to take the CD. It goes with it. So if anyone wants a book, or if anyone wants to give me your email address so that I can put you on the newsletter, just bring your things up, and I will sell and sign as long as anyone is interested. So, cheers to all.